Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for the webinar entitled The ACBs of Business Leadership, which is presented by Jason Bingham, Vice President of the Central Territory for Trane North America. I'm Jaren Hart, the Content Marketing Manager at Denison Consulting, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. We're really excited to have Jason with us to share some of his key learnings from his experience leading culture change at Trane. But before we get started, I'll just quickly address a few technical items. Jason will present for about 45 minutes, and then he will answer questions that are submitted by our audience for around 15 minutes following his presentation. So I wanted to ask you to submit your questions for Jason throughout the session using the questions control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. It would be great if you could submit these throughout rather than waiting until the end, just so that we can move right into the question and answer session and address as many of them as possible. So I'm happy to get started, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Jason Bingham. Jason is currently responsible for the $1 billion Central Territory as Vice President for Trane North America. His previous role was Vice President of Customer Strategy for Trane North America, and before that he was District Manager for Trane's Virginia District. Under his leadership, Trane and the Virginia District have received multiple regional and national awards and distinctions. Jason has developed strategies, planning processes, and leadership curriculums that have been distributed across the nation, and he holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Electric Engineering from the University of Tennessee. So I am happy to turn the microphone over to Jason to get us started on today's webcast. So Jason, take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Jaren, and welcome everybody. Appreciate your time and talking about a passion of mine, which is the thought that business managers should lead with culture to deliver their business results. It's a term I now call Cultureship, and that the ACBs of business leadership kind of describe how that works. Again, I'm Vice President Central Territory for Trane. I've been with Trane and Ingersoll Rand for 21 years. We have 2,000 people in the Central Territory with about 50 offices. And so a lot of cultures that exist within the Central Territory alone. What we're really going to do is go together through three major leadership roles I've had at Trane and Ingersoll Rand, and the lessons I've learned there, where I've screwed up and where I've gotten some key lessons, and how those have really formed into three what I call ultimate beliefs that make up this concept of cultureship. In those roles, in this career, there is no doubt in my mind, it has been proven through experience that culture connects directly to business results. I believe that because of the experiences I've had, and yet there are plenty of other quantitative metrics that prove it as well. There was a study that did metrics on associate satisfaction, which is certainly an indicator of culture. And what they found was a 1-point improvement in associate satisfaction equated to a 42% improvement in operating income for the companies they studied. Another study showed that a 5-year growth rate for companies that had the top 25% of culture rating was 62% versus those in the bottom 25 at 21%. Further, another study had a return on equity at 21% for those in the top 10% of culture surveys versus the 6% in the bottom 10. And this one, which I think even more clearly indicates or connects culture to business results, these two together I think show the connection distinctly. The fact that high-performing cultures are 45% more likely to keep their associates greater than 5 years. And then when you think about when your associates stay in your company, they learn how things get done, they get better experience, they're able to serve our customers better, and by staying over 5 years, it's proven that they're twice as productive and 10 times more profitable for the company. So a culture helps us keep our people, and then our people get better at what they do, and that drives productivity and profit. Imagine that. But I think we're probably talking to a group of people here that already get that, And so I won't belabor the subject. I'll just tell you that it is certainly a belief of mine But before we jump into some of these beliefs and how I learned them or were taught them, let's first get grounded on culture. And so this slide I use to at least explain what culture is in my head. And simply for me, it's two key pictures. The first one is this belief bubble, the things in our head. And it's really the beliefs a team has about how things get done around here, here being this office, this team, this business, that guide our actions and decisions. So if we believe that it's right and it's something the company wants us to do to give feedback to each other and our leaders, then we will act according to that. We will actually provide that feedback directly to each other, and if the response is as we expect from our leaders, we'll continue that belief, and it will be self-sustaining. It will become a core belief of the culture about how things get done around here that guides our actions and decisions. If we believe that customers are our number one priority and we're empowered to go serve them any which way we can, then we will go act according to that. In contrary, if we believe that the dollars are most important, we might slow down before we make decisions on our customers and therefore not be as responsive, so on and so forth. And so there, to me, is the definition of culture, but it's also the definition of how culture connects directly to results. It is our actions that determine our results. It's hard to argue with that, and it's in our personal lives as well. If we sit on the couch all day and eat bonbons, we're going to gain a little weight, and that is the result. Versus working out 4 or 5 times a week, we're going to get a different result. It's true in our personal life as well as our business life, and it's certainly true as a culture, because our culture determines our actions and our action determines our results. So if that's the definition and the connection to our business results, the key question, I think, for all of us, certainly for me, is how do we help drive a high-performing culture? And the reality is the answer is each and every one of us that exist within that culture. Every person that's a part of that team, that company, that culture is responsible for it, is influential on it. But the person that has the number one responsibility, the greatest influence, and therefore the focus of our discussion today, is the leader. This little bouncy guy that just came in is representative of the leader, because the leader plays a major role in developing the culture of his or her team. And they do that really through two key mechanisms. First, the experiences they provide their team, how they talk, react, decide, direct, listen, promote, who they go to lunch with, who they don't go to lunch with, who comes into their office when they make decisions, and who is excluded. Every day and in every way, the leader is providing experiences for those associates. Those associates are watching, and as they watch, they're building beliefs about how things get done around here. So if you want to know who's most likely the creator of the current culture, go look in the mirror if you're leading that business. But it's not just the experiences that we create this culture, it's also how we arm the actions. So the beliefs in our people and our associates are in their heads. It's not something we can see, but the actions that come from those beliefs certainly can be seen. And how leaders arm those actions, allow, reward, and model, determines the beliefs at the end of the day. If we act in a way that is not in alignment with the culture we want, the high-performing culture, but a leader allows it, then it will continue as a belief that this is how things get done around here. On the other hand, if we act in accordance with the culture and we reward that action, then we sustain the better belief. And how the leader responds to each of those actions, how they model behaviors, back to our example of feedback, if we have that belief initially and the action is in accordance with that, and so I get feedback from an associate, if my response to that, my modeled response is, I can't believe you just told me that, and oh, by the way, your raise evaluation is coming up soon, don't expect one, that's going to change their belief pretty quickly, and I suspect I won't get feedback moving forward. If I respond in a very caring way with an appreciative response for their feedback, then I'll sustain that belief. So, as we all know, leaders play a major role because of their authority within the team and company, but they do it more specifically through these experiences and how they arm the actions. One thing I think I know that I've learned through my career, and I want to make sure that we're all clear on, is that although the leader takes a major responsibility in building high-performance cultures, the goal of each and every leader should be that the associates own that culture, that they frame it up, they guard that culture in such a way that they're willing to protect it and fight for it. Those people who have been involved with the high-performing culture probably know what I'm talking about. It's been such a great experience. They felt something special, and no matter who the leader is, they're willing to stand up for that culture. And so, in fact, for high-performing cultures, they can build leadership. A new leader comes in, and they can actually train that leader how to lead that culture. That happened for me, as you'll hear. And that's really the ultimate goal of leadership, is to sustain that culture for the long term, which requires ownership within that culture, because sooner or later that leader will leave and somebody else will come back in. Yet until we get to that point, we have to really ask ourselves how we build those cultures as leaders, and that key to that is yet another one of these belief bubbles. What are the beliefs of our leaders about leadership, about culture? And that's what I want to talk about for the next 30, 45 minutes. What are some core beliefs, what I call ultimate beliefs, that if we have them as leaders will guide most of our actions, most of the experiences we provide, and how we allow, reward, and model so that we build these high-performing cultures almost naturally. That's what we'll go into. Before we do, I want to get your feedback. As you think about business results, there's all 5 of these directly impact business results. There's no doubt about it. And culture's one of those, may or may not be the most important, but love to hear your thoughts. If you only had one choice, which one would you pick as the most important for business results? Jerry, you want to take it from here?
Great, thanks, Jason. We've launched the poll, and we'll give everybody just a couple more seconds to respond. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap that up now. And it looks like 60% of the responses, Jason, were for high-performing culture. So I'll hand it back to you.
Well, that excites me, obviously. You can tell my passion for culture, so I'm glad we're all a group together. I can tell I'm going to learn a lot from you, so that'll be fun. We have 2 more questions coming like this, so I look forward to hearing your responses there. So let's go a little deeper into my experiences and these kind of 3 ultimate beliefs that have come from them. I'll overview them real quickly, and then we'll go through the specifics here. But the first one is that changing the culture is directly connected to changing the results, and that both of those can happen very quickly. If our leaders believe this, if they believe the culture is connected to results and it can happen quickly, then they will put a focus here. They'll put energy and time here. The second one is that enlightened teams achieve superhuman success. I'll explain what an enlightened team is so you get a better understanding of that. But the point here is if our leaders believe that this enlightened teamwork can be created pretty quickly and that it achieves incredible results, again, they'll put some emphasis here and they'll spend some time helping build these teams. And then the other one, the last one, is kind of this overarching and sometimes another way to look at it is foundational belief, is that every leader should believe that purposeful associates create loyal customers that deliver business results, premier business results. If our leaders believe this, then they will balance every decision they make around associates, customers, business, the ACBs. And they will understand that it's the A's that create the C's that create the B's. There is a sequence here. And so when they see a business result that's not what they wanted, they'll ask a lot of questions about the A's and C's, not just about the B's, to make sure that they themselves aren't building the wrong culture, don't have the right people in the right spots, that kind of thing. So the ACBs, the changing of culture, and the enlightened teams as ultimate beliefs really guide all of our leaders in their decisions, their actions, and behaviors so that we can create a winning culture. Let's go into how I got that, and I got it through a lot of failure. And the first chance at screwing up for me was going to Roanoke, Virginia. I was in my first part of my Trane career was in Birmingham, Alabama as a sales engineer, and then they asked me to go to Huntsville, Alabama, where I was a sales engineer as well as a team leader there. And then I got this phone call from corporate. I was on some list, and they wanted me to look into being the general sales manager for Roanoke. And I told them very candidly that I wasn't leaving. I was very happy in Huntsville, but they said, we don't mind wasting the money. We'll fly to Roanoke. And so I went to Roanoke. And this is actually the Roanoke office here. It really is an old farmhouse, very indicative of their culture. And I walked into this house and was blown away. You felt the culture immediately. As I left Huntsville, I told my wife that there was no way I was leaving. I just didn't want to get off this list. But as I walked into Roanoke, I felt something pulling me immediately. And I remember being in the Roanoke airport, getting ready to fly back to Huntsville, called my wife, and my wife said, "Hey, honey, how did it go?" And I said, "Man, it was something." And her real response was, "Oh, shit, we're moving, aren't we?" That was real, and at the end of the day, as you might suspect, we did move, my whole young family there. And the reason was there was something there I could learn, and it was sure enough the case. It took me a while to learn it, though, because I walked in with some really bad beliefs about leadership and culture. And although I didn't know it at the time, I was doing everything I could to screw that place up. These bad beliefs were guiding my actions in a bad way. The experiences I were providing to that culture was not aligned with that high-performance culture they had. And I was working my tail off, getting up very early, working really late, not getting much accomplished because of that. And I remember about 6 months into that role, my first true leadership role, a lady named Tammy Swain was a project administrator in our contracting group, walked in my office and said, "Hey, Jason, a bunch of us have kind of gotten together and we've got some concerns about where our culture is going. And we'd like for you to come in and kind of listen to those concerns." At that point, I was looking for any advice I could, so sure enough, I walk in, and they had built a PowerPoint presentation about the culture that we have and need to have, and the recent behaviors that were not aligned with that, including my leadership behaviors that needed to change. And so they're very direct with me about that. And fortunately, I took that well and learned from them. And over a short period, they trained me how to lead that culture. And then I learned with them how to take that culture to the next level. We achieved some pretty cool results. And because of that, Trane asked me to take over all of Virginia. And so now I've got the right side of Virginia here, that darker gray area. It's Richmond, the main center point there, but 3 more offices. And this was a really unique experience for me because contrary to Roanoke, where you had this high-performing culture and I was kind of learning how to lead it, now was my opportunity to try to put that into action. Richmond was more of a culture that was mediocrity. The previous leader there I heard was said, you don't want to be in the top performance and you don't want to be in the bottom performance, because if you are, they'll come visit. Corporate will come here. If you stay at the medium area, nobody will show up. And so there was kind of a goal of being mediocrity, and there was a great opportunity for me to practice some of the new stuff I'd learned in Roanoke. I wasn't obviously mature at it, but it was great to go practice it. And we did that, and again, I remember vividly, I don't know how long it was, we'll call it 6 months, but Diane Martin, a project manager in our equipment business, walked into my office and she said, "Jason, I got to tell you that the energy in this business is really, really amazing. You've done some great stuff with our culture, but you got one thing you got to do differently." And I said, "Diane, what's that?" And she said, "You're the one that owns it, and we need to be the one that owns it." It was a slap in the face because it was a lesson I learned in Roanoke. But she was saying something a little bit more than that lesson. She was saying that the associates not only own the culture, they need to own the development of that culture. And I was immediately aware of that because of my previous lesson. And so I asked Diane what we should do, and she agreed to lead a team, a culture development team that we soon called the Virginia Way. And they did some incredible work. The work they did there was really around 3 key pillars. First and foremost, this culture team provided culture clarity. They created a culture card that described the vision, where we're going together, the mission, what we do together, and the guiding principles, how we agreed to behave together, those actions and behaviors that we found in that first definition of culture. So they defined that and provided real clarity to our associates of the expectations and the desire to grow for our culture. They also, with my support, focused in on leadership development. Knowing that the leaders were the main influencer on culture, we needed to engage them. We needed to talk about how a leader impacted and influenced culture. We needed to have a lot of discussions about that culture, and we needed to understand or build some capability around that. And then third, they wanted the associates to understand their role. And so they built some classes that had each person self-rating themselves on 10 key competencies, and then sitting with teams of people to share their ratings and listen to other people as they shared their ratings, so that we had awareness of each other around our strengths and development areas. When they did this, they created a very high-performing culture, which delivered some incredible results. Unfortunately, I did not know Denison before I walked into Richmond. I wish I did, because this would not be a full circle, I promise. But I can tell you it's a full circle now. What they did was create a very high-performing culture of almost full circumflex for all of Virginia, not just Roanoke. And they also delivered incredible business results. We started that Virginia Way in 2007. By 2008, they were the only office, I think it was one of two actually, that achieved the budget. One of over 2 or 3 in 2008, one of only 2 or 3 in 2010. By the way, I was not there in 2010. Yet another example of that the associates need to own that culture. But they were the only office in all 3 years to achieve budget. That's how quick they moved the culture and how much the culture moved the results. Lots of other examples here around the parts, service, contracting business, and our overall rating of a pace setter office, 2 years, 2 different times. So incredible results from the experience there and from the culture. And I walked away with some key lessons. The first is that associates own and develop the culture. That needs to be our goal. The second was that culture change can happen very, very quickly. And that the third, the results, the business results, will follow very quickly after the change in culture. All right, so that's the first one. That's kind of that ultimate belief around culture's connected to business and it can happen quickly. Before we go into the next one, which is all about high-performing teams, I'd love to get your feedback. As you see these 5 characteristics of high-performing teams, hopefully you've had experiences with a high-performing team. As you look at these, all of them are certainly important. If you had to only pick one, which would you pick? Jaren?
All right, thanks, Jason. So again, we've launched the poll. We'll give you a couple more seconds to respond. And we'll look to wrap the poll up in about 5 seconds.
Well, you keep it moving there, Jaren, don't you?
All right, Jason, it looks like 47% of respondents marked trust as the #1 characteristic.
I love that answer. Very insightful. At the end of the day, high-performing teams is all about relationships, and relationships are all about trust. So I think you've hit the core there. Obviously, some of these other comments around clarity of purpose, clarity of values, goal alignment, and even leadership of the team were critical as well. So thanks for the feedback there. Let me tell you what I learned about high-performing teams and what built this ultimate belief around enlightened teams achieve superhuman success. The next role I had was to be the Vice President of Strategy for Trane North America. And these are actually a depiction of the 4 different strategies our team created. The first you'll notice is build a winning culture. The next is leverage and grow our foundation. The third is to become building information experts. And the fourth is to be a true business advisor. We're very proud of building these strategies, but I'm even more proud of helping to facilitate an enlightened team. We pulled together a team of people that had never been a team before. In fact, they each own their own little businesses and were part or located in different cities across all of North America. And for the first time, we had put them together as one team. And that was one heck of a challenge to make us all work together. And in fact, even though we didn't know it, each one of us had actually hurt each other. We would go into offices within these districts that I described before as a district manager. We'd go into those with our own perceptions of what we needed to do and our guidance for those offices. And then the next week, one of our peers would fly in and say something contrary to that. And sooner or later, the office was too confused to do anything, and nothing really happened. So what did we do? Well, you might have guessed it. We took what I learned in my other role that I learned from the associates there and the culture there, and we deployed it here. The first thing we did was work on culture clarity. So we got this team together 4 times in the first 6 months, and each and every one of those meetings, although it had other topics around our business and around strategy, so on and so forth, each and every one of those meetings also had some in-depth conversation about culture. And we adopted the vision and mission of the field because we thought that made sense, and we kept talking about these behaviors. I remember vividly in the fourth meeting, it came alive all on its own. We had talked about it for 3 meetings now, and now it no longer needed me to kind of instigate it. It was instigated on its own, and that was actually a lesson for me that people, after feeling comfortable, after recognizing it's okay to talk about culture, will immediately run to it, almost on their own. They're naturally drawn to it, and that's exactly what happened here. The team started talking about it. They agreed we needed to get some guiding principles, these behaviors, and they immediately started to define those. I remember Sarah, the head of HR, she said, Jason, you know what? This team has always been a bunch of individuals out in the middle of the ocean all by ourselves in our own little dinghies. At least now we're in one big dinghy. And everybody laughed, and that one big dinghy became the visual guiding principle for Team First. We were now going to operate with the team first, and then if we could add value as an individual, we would do that next, which, as you might imagine, could align our offices quicker and get results much quicker. Trey, the leader for retail division, then spoke up and he said, you're right, Sarah, about that one big dinghy thing. I got to tell you, there's something else we got to do. In the past, we've always talked a lot of crap about each other. We got to cut the muda. I'm still not sure what muda means. Supposedly it means crap in some other language, but that was the verbal kind of message or indicator for us that we needed to talk direct with respect. It's a term I learned back in Virginia. It was now coming to me again in this team. And the reality is, if we have a problem with each other, if we have an image or a concern about each other, the only way to handle that is to talk directly to each other about it with respect for each other. And so this team had gathered that one as a guiding principle, direct with respect or cut the muda. And then finally, Laura, our head of healthcare, spoke up, and she said, one thing that's always drove me crazy about ourselves is that we really are not getting things done. We have not moved the business like we could, and it's time we get shit done. Excuse my language again, but that GSD, and by the way, externally we used get stuff done, but that acronym GSD became our guiding principle for results focus. We were going to hold ourselves accountable to business results. So that was the culture clarity we worked on. It was not some kind of incredible mythology of doing it. It was just simply talking about culture. Sooner or later it got its own life, and we built our own culture clarity, and then we were able to lead with it. The other thing we did as a team was do this personal development, like you heard in Virginia, where we got a self-description or rating of 10 key competencies, shared those with our teammates so that we were candid and direct with each other. We got to practice some of that cut the muda behavior. And we also got to realize the strengths of each person in the room so that this enlightened team could come to bear. We could put the right person in the right spot at the right time to achieve our culture, our vision, and mission with the right team. And the results followed really quickly. It was the first time ever that we had strategic processes common across all of North America, that we had goals aligned with the business results. So the strategies actually drove goals in each and every one of our businesses, and they were directly connected to business results. And then we ourselves held ourselves accountable through scorecards and budgets. And the results followed in healthcare, industrial, retail. Incredible business results happened because this enlightened team, a combination of culture clarity and personal or individual awareness, was able to drive quickly to the vision, mission, and goals of our company. So that was the lesson or key lesson there, that culture clarity is a natural thing and will almost drive its own. You just have to have the courage to bring it up. And then enlightened teams are the combination of culture clarity and individual awareness. Before we go into my third one here, I want to get some feedback again. As you think about business decisions, each of you have been involved in business decisions in the past, and I know it always takes a lot of different inputs to make good decisions, but if you had to pick only one of these 5, which one would you pick? Jaren?
Thanks, Jason. We've launched the poll, and while you're responding, I just also wanted to remind the audience to feel free to submit some questions when you get a chance for Jason at the end of the webinar. So we'll probably go ahead and wrap the poll now. And Jason, it looks like 53% of respondents voted for alignment with strategic plans. So I'll hand it back to you.
That's again, great response. As I think about strategy, it really pulls in the ACBs. A good strategy understands our core around our associates. It certainly understands the market and our customers, and then it understands our business expectations and results. It kind of ties all that together. So that's probably the best ACBA answer I could think of. And then the other ones around associates and customers also obviously fit in there as well. So thank you. My next role, so I've moved from district manager to VP of strategy, and now I'm VP of Central Territory. In VP of strategy, I didn't own a P&L. I now do in this role. It was 2,000 people, 7 districts, 14 states, plus Canada, 50 different offices, so on and so forth. I remember when I interviewed for this job, I was interviewing with my soon-to-be boss, who asked me a pretty insightful question. He said, Jason, if you were to get this role, what would be your greatest challenge? And after a little bit of thought, I answered, Dave, my greatest challenge would be meeting your short-term expectations of business results while developing a high-performing culture for our future results. And obviously he liked that answer because he gave me the job, but in reality, that's the reason I took the job. I had had the opportunity in Virginia to learn what culture was and to kind of practice building it in my own district. I had the opportunity in that strategy role to build these enlightened high-performance teams with my own team. The question was, could I do it with leaders of districts, leaders of teams? Could I be a leader of leaders? Could I be a leader of a company to drive culture as the business driver? So that's what I took the goal. It's been my main focus. I have led with culture since I took the job. And what that means is one of the first things I did was get Denison for each and every one of my offices. This is 5 of the offices. You can see we had a pretty big difference between the culture in each of these offices. Top left being a very high-performing culture, top right being a very low-performing donut-of-doom culture. And one thing to kind of point out here, the person that led the top right is no longer with our company. I, within a pretty short time frame, decided that there was no way this leader who had built this donut of doom had the trust within their organization to get out of it very quickly. And because I believed culture drove business results, and we could change the culture quickly if we had the right leader, I had to change that leader. That sent some shockwaves through the organization because you don't change out district managers often. And it added a little bit of complexity to my teamwork and trust within my team because they didn't really know who I was yet. But it also built a long-term trust because they knew my main focus was about the ACBs and about our culture. So we worked immediately on culture. We made it a priority. We made the ACBs a part of what we did. And as you can imagine, the things I got to learn from the previous teams, I was able to deploy in this team. So imagine 7 different district managers as well as 6 people that are functional and business stream owners, 13 people on one team trying to drive the Central Territory business, all working on culture clarity, personal development, and leadership development. We met 3 times in the first 6 months. Every one of those meetings had a discussion about culture, the vision, mission, and guiding principles. We did eventually build our culture card so that everybody could lead with that culture. We also worked on personal development. We were candid with each other about our strengths and development areas so that we could recognize each of us for our strengths and put each other in the right spots. And we worked on leadership development. Each of us had a responsibility, a huge responsibility, as you saw on our first culture slide, to create that high-performing culture. And so we had to take responsibility of that by taking responsibility for our experiences we provided and the arming we provided to those cultures. But this team gave me yet another gift, which was an advanced understanding of this ACB approach. Our vision was to be the best. We wanted to be the best place to work, the best place to buy, and the best place to invest. It was a directional vision versus a destinational vision, and it told us we all wanted to get better every day. But what this team taught me was it said much more than that. They took that vision and it became the mantra for the culture. It said that every leader must believe that every decision has to understand the impact on associates, customers, and business. Some people felt that in the past it was really a BBB business. It was all about the numbers. And the only real impact or the heaviest influencer on business decisions was the business. And we wanted to change that. We wanted every leader to believe that it could not be out of balance. And the only way to develop a high-performing business was to develop a high-performing culture. And the only way to do that was to constantly balance the ACBs. And the other thing they said was, it's not just a balance of the ACBs, it's recognizing that it's a sequence of the ACBs. That the A's develop the C's and the C's develop the B's. So they gave me that core lesson, that core belief, what we call the third ultimate belief. And by doing that and combining it with the other two, the Enlightened teams, and committing to changing the culture to change results, we all did some incredible stuff. We were the only territory to exceed budget. We had the highest operating income percentage. We had the highest leverage, which means of the growth revenue, how much of it dropped to the bottom line. We brought more to the bottom. And we ended up influencing, we'll talk about this here in just a minute, the North America Culture Initiative. And none of that stuff had happened in the last 3 years. We had not been one of the best territories. In fact, we were called the flyover territory by my previous boss, and now we were called the fly-to territory, which is something we were proud of. So core lessons from that experience in my life is that it confirmed culture clarity is a natural thing that people aspire to. You just have to have the courage to bring it up. It confirmed this idea of enlightened teams that I'd learned in my previous role, and it added this new belief around the ACBs. You should put all that together in kind of one slide. This is what you get. You get these three ultimate beliefs, or the what we're trying to get within our leaders' heads. And you've got the how you get that by these three kind of pillars: culture clarity, leadership development, and personal development. And don't get me wrong, to the right of this, if you can imagine it, there's a whole bunch of blocks that are for our business. We absolutely have to have business hows and business whats. And I guarantee you, each of your businesses does. It's almost natural. It's required for you to have that. This is not saying that you shouldn't have that. It's saying that you have to add this to that. If you're only a BBB business, I don't believe you can ever get to premier business results. You have to add this piece, the ACB piece, to get there. And that means a focus on culture, a focus on leadership, and a focus on personal development so that we can build a real belief around the culture being a priority, building enlightened teams that deliver that culture, and having a foundational belief in every person that it's the ACBs that guide each and every one of our decisions and actions. To do that, taking it a level deeper, I use tools like Denison. It defines the culture. I have not found another tool that quantitatively defines the culture and moves me to action. So I use this tool to define where we are, and then I build specific action plans within each of these pillars of personal, culture, and leadership development. By doing that, what I've seen happen is the personal development builds purpose within our people, the culture development develops excellence in everything we do, and the leadership development delivers power or leverage. The leader becomes a huge leverage point for everybody else. And when we do that, these three beliefs become core within every leader, and that is what delivers the business results when we combine it with our business processes. This is what we've done, and in fact, we've done it in North America now. That same process we used, we invested in Denison across all of North America. We combined that, and we recognized that we had some core strengths as cultures. In this case, we thought it was our alignment of goals, and we also had some weaknesses. And then this one we picked was team focus or team orientation. So we picked the kind of one strength and one weakness as our focus areas, and then we dove into these pillars. And under the associate pillar, we focused in on actions around talent reviews, personal development training, and career paths. Under leadership development, we focused in on territory leadership development plans and classes, top-line leader development plans and actions, and then coaching training for all of our leaders. And then under the culture development, these focus areas led us to actions around a culture card, culture clarity, which we now have in the hands of every associate in Trane North America. Culture focus areas, so that we could actually change this culture. Even though we had a card, we didn't think we could move all of the behaviors at once. So instead, we picked 3 that every leader in Trane North America was going to focus on in 2012. And we believe if we move those 3, we move the culture, which moves our results, and everyone feels like that culture is important. And then we created a culture measurement, which was Denison as well as another scorecard to make sure we held ourselves accountable to that focus. These are some pictures of what that looks like. The top left is kind of the culture scorecard. To the right side, you see our culture card. It actually looks like a credit card. And the bottom is this idea that we're going to pick 3, and as leaders drive those from a vision to testing it, to confirming it, to making them a belief in every one of our associates, to mastering it. And then when we come back at the beginning of the year, next year, we'll pick 3 more. I went quickly through that because I suspect many of you have had similar tools and things in the past. But it really, I want to emphasize that when you really focus on it, when you have the courage to bring up culture and drive it, even though you don't know exactly what to do, you will get the business results. And it happened for Trane North America. We exceeded budgeting operating income and did a great job with our leverage for the first time in 3 years. And this says Q1 expectations, but actually we exceeded Q2 expectations as well. And probably most importantly, the energy in our company is really, really rising. I imagine many of you experienced the tough economy over the last 2 or 3 years, and the energy and engagement of associates has taken a hit. I can tell you we're on a different track. We are growing substantially the energy within our company. I think that's probably the most powerful piece of this culture focus. At the end of the day, we wish we'd started this a lot earlier.
Thank you.
That's awesome. We got a little feedback, Jaren. Are we okay there?
Yeah, sorry about that, Jason.
All right. So kind of in summary, I kind of challenge each of us to think about our strengths and challenges around our culture. What is it that we do well and don't do well around personal leadership and culture? And then what are we going to do about it? What are you going to do about it so that you actually have some plans? And my biggest pressure point here is don't wait. Go ahead and have the courage to bring up the discussion, to talk about people, leadership, and culture development. I promise you there'll be a natural attraction to those discussions, and on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th time you bring it up with your team, they'll lead it with you. They'll take over and help you guide it. With that said, I'm done, Jaren. So any questions or comment I'll be happy to speak to.
Well, Jason, thanks so much. We're starting to get some questions pouring in, so why don't we just go ahead and get started. One of our first questions is from Sean, and he asks, Jason, how much of what you accomplished do you believe is your passion toward culture ACBs, and how much is your delivery based on your personality?
Interesting question. Yeah, I mean, my personality is different. You can probably tell I'm a little high energy, and that's both a strength and weakness of mine. So, you know, I would say the answer to the first question is as I moved into Roanoke, and I had that blessing of a challenge around figuring out how to lead that culture, I started consuming every leadership book I could. And so I did build a passion around leadership. And so I think part of your answer is yes, you've got to have a passion for leadership. And that will sooner or later, I believe, drive towards a passion of culture. I didn't have that initially. I didn't have it figured out initially. But I did initially realize that I had to become a better leader. And so that, I think that, to answer your question, Sean, I think that's absolutely paramount. You've got to have a passion for that. As far as my style, I don't think that's the answer at all. I do things my way, and I've got a strength around energy, but I've got some weaknesses. I can run over people. I can be too direct. I can be less respectful at times. So I've got my strengths and weaknesses around my style. I've seen quieter, less energetic people that can do better than I around leading people. And so I don't think it's so much a style thing, but it's certainly a commitment to leadership thing.
Great. Thanks, Jason. We have a question from Karen, who's wondering if you're not in a formal leadership or management position, but you want to be an agent of change, how can you start to leverage some of the topics you were discussing today to sort of get leaders on board?
Oh, that's a fabulous question, and I hope you heard my first comment around that, who impacts culture, and it's really every one of us that's in the team. So really every one of us can impact it is the first message. Leaders have authority, so they have more influence, but that doesn't minimize the impact and at the end of the day the ownership of each and every associate on the team. My best advice is to learn direct with respect. Truly commit to being a contributor towards this high-performing culture by openly talking about what concerns you about the culture in a very respectful way to everybody. Don't be condemning, don't be blaming, don't be justifying. Just simply bring up the issues that are in your head and in such a way that it's not an attack. It's just a hey, can we talk about this? And I'll bet you in so doing, other people will say, you know what, instead of reacting if you're attacking them, they recognize it for just the noble intent it is. You're going to have a lot of people that attach to the question and start asking it as well. And hopefully sooner or later, no matter who the leader is, the team takes over, and that's the real goal.
Thanks, Jason. That's very insightful. Let's see, I'm going to move into another question. Brian has asked, if you would recommend one book on leadership, what would it be?
Oh, holy cow. I'm going to look behind me for a minute, so hang on. Man, I really don't know. I think it depends. You know, you've probably heard The Drive by Daniel Pink. That one's got some really neat concepts about motivation. You've probably heard about Change the Culture, Change the Game. It's got some very prescriptive ways that you can change culture. There are some really interesting books about leadership that are probably not the normal book that you've seen out there on the shelves, but Change Your Questions, Change Your Life is a powerful book out about how leaders decide if they're in the judger mode or the open or listener mode. And so core leadership behaviors that books like that can bring to bear are powerful. I like one of the first books I read as a leader was First Break All the Rules by Buckingham. He's got a lot of neat books around leadership. I don't know. Those are some of the first ones I could throw off the top of my head.
Great, thanks, Jason. We have another question from Scott, who's wondering, how do you focus on what's positive to keep building momentum, and how do you keep culture fun throughout these processes?
Great question. Actually, I would answer it 2 days. One, I think if you're talking about culture, there's a natural positivity to it. So simply as a leader of a team, bringing up culture is a very positive thing for the associates to say, because it innately says that you're important as an individual and we're important as a team. So in fact, when I do my town halls, quote unquote, for my districts and my teams, I rarely bring up business. We certainly have a slide on business at times, but I spend the majority of my time talking about culture, and that is a positive thing. Now, the other side of that question, which is how do I maintain positive when you're in the pressure of a business, that's a lot tougher. And I got to tell you, I go to the negative side myself. I have to go into my headgear adjustment, as I call it, every once in a while. I mean, there's a lot of pressure in business, and it's really tough to keep that ACB balance. And so some things I do there is I have a weekly reminder that just kind of pops up, and I kind of challenge myself with a couple of questions there. The other thing I do is schedule what I call strategy meetings, and it's a meeting that doesn't have a tactical target. It's more of a discussion maybe, so I might pick one of my DMs and all I want to talk about is strategy, or all I want to talk about is how we could grow culture, some more philosophical question that we're going to talk about an hour. And in so doing, you kind of get out of the minutia a little bit, and it forces you to kind of think broader, which kind of builds up your positive energy and kind of adjust that headgear. I hope I answered that question yet, but I don't think it's easy.
Well, yeah, that's great. Let's see. We have a question from Lauren who says, what tools or training have you gotten that have helped build these high-performing cultures?
Oh, wow. Really not much. I've gotten certainly some support from some experts at times. I've read a lot of books. And then I think the number one training for me was the courage to say it. That's the courage to step forward and try some stuff. Back to the original question of my style, this might change the answer a little bit now I think about it. I'm a slightly fearless in my style. I don't mind getting started. It doesn't have to be perfect to get started. And that made it easy to learn and be trained, if that makes sense. So I would start some personal development class or leadership development class. I would take some concept from a book and kind of build the class and then just get started. And it was never just right, but we would together as a team, whoever was doing it, make it right, and then it turned into something we could use for others. So maybe that's the key answer there is as you read something, don't be afraid to get started. Go ahead and move forward with culture, leadership, or personal development, and then be open enough to learn from all the people involved about how to make it better as you go down the road.
So I think we will just answer one last question here. This kind of segues into it. Our last question is, does this cultureship and business leadership take deep experience, or can anybody do it?
I really believe anybody can do it. Now that I think about the original question around leadership, though, I think it does take a commitment or desire for leadership. But if you have that, if you really want to serve others, build others, be a strong leader for others, then I think you got everything you need. You don't have to have a lot of experience. You don't have to have a lot of innate skills. As I said, I think anybody can be a great leader. The question is, are you committed to that? Is that a passion of yours? Is that how you're going to make a difference with your life? If so, then you got everything you need, and you just need to get started. And recognize screwing up's great, getting it right's great, all of it's great. Just keep taking those steps forward.
Thanks so much, Jason. And I think that's going to do it for our Q&A portion. I want to thank you again for being our presenter today. It was really wonderful to have you here, and I wanted to let everybody know that I think you had shared that you're putting some of these thoughts that you've shared today into a book called Cultureship, the ACBs of Business Leadership, that will be forthcoming maybe sometime this fall. So I hope everybody kind of keeps an eye out for that. And I guess before we close, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us, for submitting great questions, and a link to today's webinar will be sent to you, and it will also be posted on our website. We also have 2 new galleries of webinars on the website, and this will be in one of those galleries, so I encourage people to check it out. So that'll do it for us, and I thank you again, Jason, and everyone have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.